Oh, my homunculus, my dirty girl. Good morning and welcome to Lost for Words. I am Sarah Woods and we are still exploring some great women poets, continuing with lovely Miss Sylvia Plath. So today we are going to be exploring a poem of hers I actually really like. It's violent, it's kind of gross. The way she describes it, I feel like anybody who reads it can feel it. If you've ever cut your finger, like while you've been cutting vegetables or slicing something, I think you will be able to immediately feel this poem. If you're ready, we'll go ahead and read it. Okay, this is poem number 191 in the collected poems of Sylvia Plath. I'm trying every week to include in the description. I feel like there's like a little, I'm gonna do it. It's either on this side or this side. There's like a tiny little arrow and you can press it and it pulls down a description. You barely notice it, but if you pull it down, in that description, I'm gonna have the whole poem and you can pull it down while you watch the video and have it all there right in front of you if you like to read it. I'm also gonna put it on the screen, so you have two places to look at it if you'd like. Okay, let's go. The Cut by Sylvia Plath. What a thrill, my thumb instead of an onion, the top quite gone except for a sort of hinge. A hinge of skin, a flap like a hat, dead white, then that red plush. Little pilgrim, the Indians axed your scalp. Your turkey wattle carpet rolls straight from the heart. I step on it, clutching my bottle of pink fizz. A celebration this is. Out of a gap, a million soldiers run, redcoats every one. Whose side are they on? Oh, my homunculus, I am ill. I have taken a pill to kill the thin, papery feeling. Saboteur, Kamikaze man, the stain on your gauze, Klux Klan. Babushka darkens and tarnishes, and when the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence, how you jump, Trepanned veteran, dirty girl, thumb, stump. So I feel like if you get squeamish, this poem is probably not your favorite, but it has a whole lot for us to unpack. So let's just go ahead and start. She starts off with, what a thrill, my thumb instead of an onion, the top quite gone except for a sort of hinge. Okay. So we already have this feeling of like, what a thrill. So I cannot tell if she's being sarcastic or sincere, but either way, she's using the language of something that you would be excited about. And she's like, what a thrill, my thumb instead of an onion. So we get this image of Sylvia Plath. She's in her kitchen and she is slicing an onion, and in that process, she slices her thumb. Like, this gives you like a glimpse of what it's like to be inside the mind of somebody who's a poet, an artist, like a visual person who's likes to create like metaphors and things. It sort of takes you into their world and what it's like to be doing something, and then all of a sudden you can visually see or imagine into the situation your feelings. And that's what she does into this cutting of her thumb. She is cutting an onion, accidentally cuts her thumb, and suddenly we're in her imagination, we're in her dream world, and it's pretty amazing, this little world that she's going to create for us just out of her thumb. So she cuts her thumb, and it says the top quite gone, except for a sort of hinge. So we're about to start to have some descriptions of the top of her thumb that are very, like, bleh. But have a lot of meaning. So the first thing we get for the top of her thumb being cut off is a hinge. And so now you have this visual picture of a piece of her thumb is sort of, it's still attached. So for me, I sort of imagine like a door, and you can put it back on, take it back off. It's like a hinge, which makes me think of a door. It allows you to see what's about to happen in the poem, and she's gonna, like, if you open up a door, you're about to see like another world, and that's basically what's about to happen. Is it's like she has cut off the top of her thumb, and a whole world is about to just invade her thumb and come out of it for us to see. She said, except for a sort of hinge of skin, a flap like a hat, a flap like a hat, dead white, then that red plush. So now we have that piece of skin. It's not just a hinge with a flap like that's like a door. Now it is a hat. So it's starting to build her thumb into like a little bit of a person to me. So not just a door anymore, but a hat. So now it says dead white. So you imagine this white hat, and then the red plush. Then you imagine like the blood that's underneath. And then it says, so now she's about to take us into a new visual. She says, little pilgrim, the Indians axed your scalp. So we went from a door to a hat. Her thumb is a little pilgrim that has been scalped by an Indian. So we've suddenly gone from just cutting her thumb instead of an onion to her thumb wearing a hat to it losing its scalp. And it's a pilgrim. It's the victim of an Indian, a savage Indian that has scalped her head, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. Who is the one that scalped this thumb? If you start to think about it like that, who's the one that cut this thumb? It's Sylvia Plath. It's her bigger self. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, is she the Indian that scalps the little pilgrim? I have an Indian that has scalped her little pilgrim thumb. So this thumb is turning into a person. Can you see it happening? It went from a hat to a scalp to a pilgrim. And then she says, your turkey wattle carpet rolls straight from the heart. Like, I love this line. It's like you can all of a sudden imagine from her heart, blood flowing from her heart to her thumb and out of her thumb, and it making like a red carpet. And a red carpet is something like a celebrity would walk on, or somebody famous, or somebody who's done something great. They roll out the red carpet for royalty. And so we have a turkey. We have her blood doing a turkey wattle. So it's just left the pilgrim and Indian language. And so you have a turkey, which makes, I mean, for me, makes me think of like their Thanksgiving or something. So then you have this blood flowing out of her thumb, and it carpet rolls straight from the heart. And then she says, I step on it, clutching my bottle of pink fizz. So this is my interpretation of this. I could be completely wrong, but to me it feels like there's this violence that is happening over here with her little thumb, her little pilgrim, and it is bleeding straight from the heart. And you have this royal red carpet coming out, and Sylvia Plath, she steps on it. So you imagine her stepping on this red carpet, and she's got her bottle of, she says pink fizz. So I imagine like like champagne or some kind of bubbly celebration wine or something. So she steps onto the red carpet with her bubbly drink, and she is ready to celebrate. So we have all this violence, and then she is giving us a picture of celebration, and a celebration this is. And so to me, I like what she's doing here, because she's giving us this really like gross and violent thing that is happening over here with her thumb. And then she's contrasting it with something that is celebratory and fun and glamorous. And to me, when you put two things like that together, it sort of like does something in your head where you're like, what is going on? What's really happening here? And it makes you think more, I feel like. She says, a celebration this is. Out of a gap, 1,000,000 soldiers run. Redcoats, every one. Now we've got the redcoats. We've got more war language coming from her thumb. So we've got, which is kind of cool, because it's a cool visual to me, because blood is red, and for them to be redcoats, which are like soldiers with the red on coming out of her thumb. She said 1,000,000 soldiers run. So just like pouring blood, pouring soldiers. So there's this war that is like coming out of this little thumb right here. And she said, whose side are they on? I think that line is important, because there's all this violence happening. She's the one who cut her thumb, and all this war and violent stuff is coming out. All these soldiers are coming out, and she's like, you can see her like, okay, like there's all these soldiers coming out. Are they on my side, or like who are they going to fight? Is that feeling that you get from her language. And she says, oh, my homunculus, I am ill. I have taken a pill to kill the thin, papery feeling. This part is cool to me, because she starts to talk to her thumb, and she says, oh, my homunculus. And I had to look up homunculus. I had no idea what that was. It is, it means little person. It's a miniature, fully formed human. I guess it was popular in 16th century alchemy and in 19th century literature. Fiction, I believe, obviously. So now she is talking to her thumb, and she said, oh, my homunculus, I am ill. So she is telling her thumb, she's like, this little person, this little world. She's like, oh, little person. She said, I am ill. I have taken a pill to kill the thin, papery feeling. So she's taking a pill. I imagine she's taking a pill to kill some kind of pain that she's having. I don't know if it's the pain because of cutting her thumb, or if it's the pain from this war that she's describing coming out of her. But she's taken a pill to kill the thin, papery feeling. I don't know if that's the thin, papery feeling of what's hinging from her thumb. Or I also know that Sylvia Plath, she has another poem. What is it called? Oh, in The Jailer, which I've reviewed in a video before this, where she has a line where she talks about the day almost like being ruined, like it's already thin and papery and full of holes, something like that. And so, but you get this feeling of depression from that visual language, which is sort of what I get from this. Like, you imagine the day being thin and fragile. And then she says, Saboteur, Kamikaze man. So she's talking to her thumb, and she's taken something for some kind of pain. And then she says Saboteur, which is somebody who sabotages things. So I'm like, okay, is her thumb, is that what she's talking about? Her thumb is this one who sabotages things, this little person. And then she says, Kamikaze man. I had to look up. I'm not super knowledgeable about war language. So this, I've heard this word before, but I didn't know what it was. But a kamikaze man is a Japanese pilot in World War II. So World War II language is very common in Sylvia Plath's poetry, especially like this little grouping of poetry that she's got going on at this time period in her life, in poems like Daddy, The Jailer, what was the other one? Lady Lazarus, and now this one, which is called The Cut. So a Japanese pilot in World War II who would make a deliberate suicidal crash into enemy territory, or into an enemy ship usually. So these were suicidal pilots that they were fighting, you know, for their side of the war, but they would kill themselves in order to win or to do damage to the other side. So her thumb, she's calling it, now she's gone from, she's been a pilgrim, scalped by an Indian, the Redcoats, to her homunculus, her little person, and then now it's a kamikaze man. So it's like this little thumb is on a suicide mission to in its war against the enemy. So it's going, you just imagine like, ooh, I don't know. So then we got more war language about to come. Or not war, this is just violent and evil. But she says, the stain on your gauze, Ku Klux Klan. So now you're taken to this group of people that hates black people and wants to like get rid of them. So we've seen language in her poems of with Germans and Jews. So this is a little bit new. It's a little bit different, but still the same idea of like one group of people trying to destroy another group of people and hating another group of people. And so she says, the stain on your gauze, Ku Klux Klan, Babushka, darkens and tarnishes. So now I start to imagine that she has started to doctor up her thumb and put gauze on it. And you know, when you first put like some kind of bandage on something that's bleeding, if the bleeding hasn't stopped, it starts to like seep into it and it'll darken the gauze. So like there's blood filling up this white gauze. So now she's imagining her thumb wrapped in gauze as a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And a babushka is, I think it's a scarf that you like tie around your head and under your chin. I think a lot of Russian grandmothers wear it. But I guess you can imagine that like the Ku Klux Klan, imagine their headdress that they wear, the all white headdress. And so you imagine it wrapped around her thumb and that white gauze darkening with blood. So now her thumb is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. It's fascinating, all these little terrible things she's ascribing to her thumb. So now it says, it's interesting to me that she went from a little pilgrim. So it went from just a hat to a pilgrim. And I think when she was describing the pilgrim, her thumb as a pilgrim, I feel like that was more, in her eyes, more of like a victim language, a victim of the person who is being killed. But then as we go on, we've got soldiers pouring out in the blood. And then now her thumb is a kamikaze man, and it's it's taking part in the war. It's not just like when it was the pilgrim, it was just being scalped. Now it's the kamikaze man that's suicidal and willing to kill itself in order to destroy its enemy. And now she's a member of the Klux Klan. So now you imagine someone who like violently like hates another group of people. And then it says, okay, the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence. To me, this is one of the most interesting parts of this poem. And I can't quite put words around what I think it means, but I'm gonna try. There's just a lot that's happened to this thumb. And now we're going inside this thumb as a little person. Sorry, I just keep holding up my thumb through this whole video. Now we go into this thumb like it's a person again. And the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence. So now we're seeing this thumb and it has its own heart. That's what I feel like when I read this. Like, we're not talking about Sylvia Plath, like inside her heart. We're talking about this little person that is her thumb and its heart. And she says, the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence. So when I imagine that, I imagine blood flowing. I don't know if I'm imagining the right thing. So if you think I'm getting this wrong, I would love to hear what you think this part means. But I guess when I think of pulp, honestly, I think of orange juice, but I'm thinking of her blood and like it pumping from her heart, its heart, and coming up to where it's been scalped and where it's been cut. And it says, the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence. Okay, so a mill is a place. A mill is a place where you so it's like a building where like grain is ground into flour. Like, that's what I think of a mill. But it's also, let me turn my little page. Okay. It's also the verb is to grind or crush something. I imagine you imagine her thumb. She's cutting onions. She has a knife and she cuts her thumb. She cut the top off. She grinded it off. That kind of, to me, I imagine that is the mill where the top of it's being cut off. And it says, the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence. So I'm trying to imagine this, a mill of silence. So like a mill, a place where you grind something, like say you grind, grain into flour. A mill of silence would be a place where you grind something into silence. I'm not sure if you mean you're grinding the silence or if you're grinding something into silence. It makes me think it could go either way. If you're grinding, if her blood from her heart of her thumb is coming out and it meets where she has sliced off the top of her thumb, that there used to be silence there, and now all of a sudden all this imagery, all this violence, all this war, like soldiers is pouring out of her. And to me it makes me think like where there was silence, Like, this was just a silent thumb. She has snipped off the top. She has ground off the silence. She has milled the silence. And all this like energy and violence and hatred and war is coming out of her thumb. So it's not, when I read that, when I read about what's happening to her thumb, it doesn't feel silent. Or you could also say that the thumb was alive. It was a person, and because it has been scalped, because it has done its kamikaze, suicidal, whatever, dive into enemy territory, that this person is dying, that this is being silenced. I have no idea which one it is. I really don't. But it makes you think. I guess for me, like reading that like little section right there, I'm like, is she killing off this little person? Has she killed off this little person and made it silent? Or has the silence been ruined by cutting it off and this whole world coming out of her? I don't know. And then it says, how you jump. Trepanned veteran. Dirty girl, thumb stump. So how you jump. So like you imagine cutting it and it's like, oh, like pain or whatever. Trepanned veteran. I had no idea what the word trepanned meant, so I had to look that up. I feel like I'm always having to look things up. So trepanned is when a hole is drilled into the human skull, which is very violent and just like a terrible thing to imagine. Sure, there's probably a need for it at some point, like in surgery or whatever, but either way, that's a very violent thing to imagine happening to the human skull. And she says, trepanned veteran. So a veteran is someone who has lots of experience in something, or it's someone who was once a soldier. And so we have her thumb she's saying a trepanned veteran. You're a soldier with a hole through your skull. All this and just a little thumb. It's really kind of amazing. And then she calls it, so we have this war veteran, this experienced soldier with a hole drilled through its skull. And then she says, dirty girl, thumb stump. I don't know if I completely understand the end. To me, the end feels weird because she has gone through this whole thing for us, taking this little thumb, this little person, and creating all these like war images out of it that are very, I would say, very masculine. Yeah, like when you think of an Indian axing a scalp, like you think of a male Indian. When you think of Redcoats soldiers, you think of male soldiers. A Kamikaze man, Klux Klan, all these war people that you imagine in your head, or I do, are men. So then you get to the end of this poem, and she calls her thumb a dirty girl, which suddenly makes more sense. Okay, it's as I'm saying this out loud, I'm starting to get this. I guess usually this image of the soldier, this war, all these war images are very male, especially in Sylvia Plath's world. If you go through her other poetry, like poems like Daddy, The Jailer, and Lady Lazarus, you get this feeling that men are very oppressive to her, and she experiences men, especially like her father, her husband, and then it turns to God and even the devil, those male figures. She's experiencing them like she is a Jew and they're a German. So she has this very violent relationship with the male figure in her life that feels like it's trying to destroy her almost. And here she's gone through all this masculine language of war and her thumb, and she's described her thumb as these men of war. And then she calls her thumb a dirty girl, thumb stump. So to me it's fascinating that she's just all this. A couple things you start to think about are like, is this thumb representational of Sylvia Plath? Is she seeing herself in her thumb? And if she's the one who cut her thumb, and now she's calling her thumb a dirty girl after giving it all this masculine, violent, warlike, ascribing all those things to that thumb, now she's a girl, a dirty girl. Like, you know, when you're reading some of her poetry, that this war that she feels between her and some of these male figures is very outside of her. And I think that's true in some of those poems. But in this one, it feels like she has let us see that that war isn't just happening outside of her, that it's happening within her. And I'm having a hard time with this one. Like, this girl thumb is just as violent as all these male tyrants and these male war people, these male soldiers. Yeah, it's like she is seeing all this male violence inside her girl thumb. It's weird. I can't quite grasp the psychology of what she's trying to show us. But I think it definitely gives you a lot to think about. But it definitely has that feeling to me of, if her thumb is herself and her thumb is all these terrible things going on, it does have that feeling of violence against herself. But the thing that I think is cool about this poem is it takes what in a lot of other poems, this war-like language and feeling, and takes what's outside of her, everything that's outside of her, oppressing her, and it takes it and it puts it like inside of her, and is something that isn't just coming from the outside, but it is in her. And if you slice off the top of her finger, it's going to pour out of her, which is really, she really does a good job of expressing this inner turmoil, this inner conflict, and laying it out there for us in a way that it's like, wow, like the intensity of pain and violence and what she is having to work through in her inner life is really incredible. I feel like that whole idea of loving yourself, like if you read this poem, it shows you how difficult of a thing that could actually be. Like, people can throw that sentence out there like, oh, you just need to love yourself. Like, okay, like that sounds lovely, I'll go do that. But meanwhile, you know, Sylvia Plath, she had this like war going on in her So going from feeling all of that to finding a place of peace would be an incredibly difficult road to walk down, I feel like. Nobody in their right mind would want to truly experience these feelings that she is feeling. And I think that it shows it's just one of the kinds of poems that shows the spectrum of what it's possible to feel as a human. Like, you can read some poems about nature that some people write, and you can just feel incredible peace inside your whole body. You can read another poem that's about that's sensual and feels like it's about lovemaking, and it can make your whole body feel like ecstatic and like a feeling of anticipation. I think her poetry is just, it allows us to see it allows us a window into one of the many feelings that the inside of a human can feel. Because she let us see her psychology, we can examine it against our own. And if we're careful, instead of like relating to it and then just dwelling there, it can be like, okay, I might have this going on inside of me. Like, what can I do? What can I do to bring this war to an end? Not killing yourself, but is there peace that can be made inside of you when there's that kind of war and turmoil going on? I don't know. So this is a painting I did inspired by Sylvia Plath. I'm gonna see if I can scoot this a little closer so you can see it. But this is, I looked up a symbol for the Jewish people because a lot of her poems, she relates to a Jew being a victim of the Germans, and I believe that is called the Star of David, and it's a symbol that Jewish people use. And then a lot of times she related, in one of her poems, she said that she felt like she was a Jew being chuffed off to a concentration camp. So I was trying to show her eye, or a woman's eye, and then like a train coming out of it, like that Nazi train that, but I kind of wanted to show that idea of her self, her inner self, being chuffed off like a Jew to a concentration camp. But I think it's interesting to think about, like, whether with Sylvia Plath there was some sense of like men in her life oppressing her and doing that to her, but it makes me wonder if she also accepted that idea of herself, that if she also hated herself the same way that she felt like these men did in her life. It makes me curious whether she loved herself, and was there any part of her experience where she was chuffing herself off as a Jew. I know a lot of the descriptions have to do with it happening from the outside with men, but if some of that inner turmoil and that inner war was inside of herself, it makes me wonder if any of it was if she was at war with herself, if that makes any sense. And if she loved herself enough to not chuff herself off like a Jew. I don't know. Anyway, this is all like so deep. I'm probably gonna get rid of half of this stuff, but anyway, I hope you guys are all having a great week, and thank you for listening to my really long discussions of Sylvia Plath's poetry. I feel like her poetry just has so much deep stuff in it, and they're so long, so it's hard to do a short video about her poetry. But thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you again next time. Bye.